Chapter 231. The Power of the Black Dragon. 4. Is that a scream? As Jean tilted his head and asked, Misha picked up Murikin. Meow. And absolutely do not come into the room. No matter how the treatment was supposed to proceed, curiosity arose, but he decided not to ask. After all, Misha was the only one in the world who could restore Murikin, so worrying was meaningless. Whatever the method, it's certainly going to be an incredibly painful treatment. Hang in there, Murikin. Unaware of the pain about to befall him, Murikin was quietly nestled in Misha's arms. I'm counting on you, Misha. See you later. Clang. The sound of the door closing was unusually heavy. Jean and Shuri blinked their eyes at each other. And a few seconds later, a scream sounded straight away. Kayahak dash. The sharp sound peculiar to cats was leaking out of the tightly closed door. Kayahak. Kayak. Shuri, startled, scratched the door as if to open it, and the noise was bone-chilling. Meow. Shuri, that's just Misha treating Murikin. Don't worry. Has it started? Quinkcantle, who happened to be passing by the corridor, stood next to Jean and spoke. He had just told Shuri not to worry, but in fact, Jean couldn't be completely reassured either. So he was about to ask Quinkcantle, will it be okay? She had been talking with Misha all night, so she must have heard something more. But Quinkcantle's complexion was dark. Even her posture, biting her nails with her arms crossed, looked as if she had committed some crime, rather than being anxious. Quinkcantle? He should hang in there well. Hang in there. A rapidly spreading sense of anxiety. Oh, didn't Misha tell you? What did she say? This treatment is not simply about turning Murikin back to his original form. If that were the case, there would be no need to worry. Misha plans to restore Murikin's old power along with it. Kayak. Kayak. From beyond the door, Murikin's screams continued. There was also something like the sound of a cogwheel turning, but Misha's voice was not heard at all. Do you mean that if something goes wrong while restoring it, Murikin could die? No, that's not it. If that were the case, Misha wouldn't have proceeded with the treatment without telling you. Quinkcantle waved her hand. Then what? If the surgery fails, he won't be in danger of life, but he'll lose all the remaining power. Jin's eyes widened. For a moment, anger surged towards Misha. If the surgery carried such risks, Misha should have consulted with him or Gilly first. However, on the other hand, it was also understandable. Murikin would surely, even with such risks, he would have said he wanted to go through with the surgery. Murikin's old power, which he heard from Murikin himself and those around him, was incomparable to now. It was at a level that could compete with Timar Runcandle. It was said to overwhelm all the dragons existing in the sky, and the might he saw directly when facing Fatal, who had incarnated as Urien a while ago, was indeed terrifying. The adjective great in Great Black Dragon Murikin really meant something. That Murikin was now in a state where he could not be said to be stronger than Jean, let alone Quinkcantle. If the two of them were to face a desperate situation together, the one to protect the other would be Jean, not Murikin. So there was no way Murikin wouldn't want the surgery. Not all guardian dragons in the world were stronger than contractors, but at least they should not be lacking. That was the general mindset of the guardian dragons. As if reading Jin's thoughts, Quinkcantle added a word. Misha may seem to dislike Murikin, but she came over here right away as soon as this happened. She will do her best, so let's wait quietly for a few days. What are the chances of success? She said it was about 50%. It's not too low. My goodness, what's this noise? It sounds like a cat is straining. Don't tell me it's Murikin. This time Gilly stood in front of the door passing through the corridor. When Quinkcantle explained again, Gilly turned pale in an instant. Jean grabbed her trembling hand. She too thought the same as Jean. If it was like that, she should have told us in advance, but then again, Murikin would have definitely agreed to it. Neither of them could leave the corridor. Naturally, comrades came one by one, and every time, the number of people standing in front of the corridor increased. Oh my, Murikin. Just listening makes me feel sick. My lord, your worries must be immense. Master Jean, Miss Gilly, he will surely overcome this. Please have some of these while you wait. By lunchtime, all the colleagues had gathered in front of the corridor. The screams continued relentlessly until nightfall. The sounds of something breaking and shattering were also increasingly heard. Just before midnight, the colleagues heard a distinctly human groan for the first time. It was a completely different sound from the cat-like screams they had been hearing, and it was unmistakably Murikin's voice. After that, the sounds of a cat's cry and a human scream alternated. It seemed that Murikin was shifting between a human and a cat during the treatment. While the colleagues grew increasingly anxious, the screams suddenly subsided, and the door was opened. The group managed to glimpse inside as the door was opened, and the room was filled with blood stains and dark orbs of energy floating around. They couldn't see Murikin. Huff! Misha, wiping the sweat off her forehead, stepped into the corridor. She looked surprised at the sight of Murikin's friends gathered in front of her. Then she shrugged her shoulders. What are you all doing here? Looking so entertained. I guess Quinkcantle told you. If you're thinking of blaming me, we have no such intention. You know Murikin better than us, so you must have decided on the surgery. Is he okay? For now. But we have to do this for a few more days. We're not outdone yet. Her sinister smile from before was gone, and she looked extremely tired. Not everyone would notice, but Jean, as a contractor of Solderet, knew how much energy she had used throughout the day. The strong energy he had felt when he first met her had significantly diminished. It was clear evidence that she had given her all to the treatment. I'm tired. I should eat something and rest. I'll prepare something right away, Miss Misha. Is there any particular food you'd like? To Gilly's question, surprisingly, Misha gave this answer. Strawberry pie. If that's not available, then some other pie made from fresh fruit. They were indeed siblings. Misha began the treatment every day around noon and finished around midnight. A week passed like this. As time went by, the frequency of human screams from the room increased compared to the cat's cries. Today is the last hurdle. I don't know what kind of problem this immature brother is causing. Misha looked at Jean and the colleagues with a sullen face. Whether he overcomes this hurdle or not, from today, Murikin will be able to join his colleagues as a dragon once again. As soon as the treatment started, a more fierce scream than ever before ensued. However, the cat's cry was nowhere to be heard. The unstable transformation state of shifting between a human and a cat had disappeared. They had no idea how the time had passed until nightfall. Everyone was anxiously staring at the firmly closed door, trying to suppress their anxiety. Even if Murikin lost his power, the way his colleagues treated him wouldn't change. But could Murikin himself bear this fact? That was the question that had kept the group anxious till now. It's almost midnight, young master. I hope he's all right. The moment she said that, the screams from inside stopped. At the same time, the noise of various treatment tools also subsided. The colleagues held their breath and waited for the door to open. Creak! As soon as the door opened, a man with hair as dark as pitch, Murikin, appeared. He smiled broadly at his colleagues. It's been a while, everyone. Murikin. Mr. Murikin. His voice, unlike before, carried a strange dignity. Seeing Murikin, Jean remembered the moment when he first met him in the storm cellar. Just like the young Jean had felt then, an overpowering aura was emanating from his gaze and attitude. The surgery was a success. The colleagues could sense this fact even before Misha announced the results. Ha ha ha! Yes, I am Murikin. Suddenly, Murikin burst into laughter like a madman. The colleagues had no choice but to back away in surprise, because of the strong aura contained in it. Crack, crack. Just from his laughter, cracks appeared on the thick stone walls of the corridor. Something that would have been impossible for Murikin 40 days ago. Yes, this is it. This is me. Ha ha. Ha 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 ack. Bang. Murikin's neck twisted violently. So violently that a normal person would surely die. Misha had come out of the room and punched the back of his head. Are you crazy, hey? Who told you to make such a racket? I've nearly lost my eardrums listening to your screams for a week. Murikin turned around and glared at Misha for a moment, then started to chuckle again. Anyway, thank you. I survived thanks to you. I'm grateful. So I'll give you a hug. Come closer. Go away. Yeah, just trying it out. I hate it too. Now go home. I have to have a celebration party with my friends. I'll send you the fee later. Keep talking. It looks like you can't see anything because you've got some strength back. Be careful. I'm telling you nicely. Why aren't you leave? Ack. Thud. Thud. Bang. At Misha's punches, Murikin's body flew around the corridor. Even at a glance, her punches and kicks were at least 8-star level. Murikin took all of it without shedding a drop of blood. The colleagues didn't know whether to be surprised by Misha's beating or to admire Murikin's durability. Only about 40% of your old power has returned, little brother. If you mess around, you could die. After beating him up for about 20 times, Misha casually threw Murikin aside and said, You deliberately only returned 40%, didn't you? Because if you returned it all, I'd be stronger than you. I don't think so. I'll give you 5 seconds. If you don't bow down and show your gratitude right away, I'll turn you back into a cat. Why would I? The moment Murikin was about to shout that out, Jean and Gilly grabbed him at the same time. Then they forced him to bow down. You've worked hard, Miss Misha. You guys too, you must have had a hard time waiting. But as annoying as it is, that guy is right. I have to go home now. Chapter 232. Lonnie Salome, 1. You're leaving? Right now. I'm busy, unlike him. Fixing Murikin took more time than I expected, so I can't afford to delay. Misha casually shrugged her shoulders, stepping on Murikin's head, who was lying down in front of her. As soon as her foot touched his head, Murikin tried to stand up with a burst of energy, but he couldn't resist her strength. Misha, who easily subdued Murikin with just one foot, had only regained 40% of his former power. The colleagues, who had felt Murikin's power for the first time, couldn't even gauge how extraordinary Misha's strength was. While Murikin was struggling, Misha calmly continued speaking. Don't feel too bad. My being busy is fundamentally for your benefit. At Misha's sudden announcement of departure, the colleagues looked at each other. However, Quinkcantle didn't seem surprised. Perhaps she had anticipated it. I'm not upset. I just feel sorry. It seems like we're just letting you go after receiving your help. There's no need for that. And now my shadow has rubbed off on you, so we can meet again whenever you have time. Unlike Murikin, Misha had many things to do aside from protecting the contractor. Especially during Soderet's absence, she had to take over all the tasks that Soderet used to handle. On top of that, she had to look for Soderet, which left her with virtually no personal time. Even on the first day, she had to prepare for Murakin's treatment overnight while having a drink with Quinkcantle. Is there anything I can help with? Misha locked eyes with Jean for a moment. Not yet. Right now, growing properly is the biggest help. In Misha's eyes, there was a full measure of satisfaction as she said this. When are you planning to return to your family? I plan to return when I turn 19. Why not earlier? Originally, I promised my father to return when I turned 20. I would already be breaking his command by going back a year earlier, so it's hard to move it up any further. That's a shame. If you were a rider, it would be easier to get it. You could bring the Guardian Knights. Where are you talking about? The old Oterium. The old Oterium? The old Oterium. That place, which used to be the capital of the Holy Kingdom, is currently the main base of the Dark Magic Council under Kinselo and the place where the final form of Annihilation Flame Gem magic book left by Lyall Zipfel is located. If you go there, there will be a magic book. It was left by Lyall Zipfel, a previous contractor. Among the colleagues, only Jean, the returnee, knew about the legacy of Lyall Zipfel. However, Jean had obtained information about the final form of Annihilation Flame Gem from Soderet in the past. So it wasn't surprising that Misha, Soderet's Black Dragon, knew about it. That place is now the headquarters of the Dark Magic Council under Kinselo. I know. So I thought it would be good to look for it after you become a knight, but if it's after you turn 19, it's too late. Well, now that this guy has regained some of his strength, he should be able to handle it even if he goes right away. You seem to know a lot about Kinzalo, Misha. I know that they once teamed up with Zipfel to scoop up contractors using the Demon Stone. And that alliance was practically broken by you. Since Misha had been shadowing Murikin, she could infer Jean and Murikin's movements to a certain extent. Also, Kinzalo and Zipfel were originally under her surveillance. She thought that the reason why Soderette disappeared might be related to them. Is there anything I can help with? If there is any important information about them that I need to tell you, I'll send a letter here. Anyway, it would be good to acquire Lyall Zipfel's magic book as soon as possible. Is someone else eyeing that magic book? Misha nodded her head. Yes, a magician I've been watching recently is after the magic book. Her name is Arya Alhart, a human girl who, like you, has a rather special destiny. The colleagues thought that since Misha was watching, it would naturally be a famous grand magician or a rising star. However, Arya Alhart was a name that none of them had ever heard of, except for one person, Jean. My mentor was already eyeing the Annihilation Flame Gem at this time? Arya Alhart. It was one of the many pseudonyms used by Valeria in his previous life. Among them, it was a pseudonym she cherished as much as her real name, meaning that she had the heart of a gray owl, and she didn't get the final form of the Annihilation Flame Gem in her previous life. Instead, she got the incomplete second form and showed it to Jean. A special destiny? If you are a child chosen by the shadow, Arya is a child chosen by history. If you ever meet her, encourage her. In the grand scheme of things, she can be considered an ally. She seemed cautious about saying more. Arya, or Valeria, was not a part of the shadow, so there wasn't much room for Misha to intervene. She was wary of giving Jean too much information about Valeria, as it could potentially affect Valeria's destiny. My mentor set the goal of recovering Hister's magic as a lifelong vital goal. Is being chosen by history related to that? In the midst of quickly rising questions, Misha lifted her foot off Murakin. I shouldn't delay any longer. I should head back. Hey, Murakin. Why? Murakin stood up and glared at Misha defiantly. However, he couldn't attack her recklessly. He felt the difference in their strength, and he was afraid that if he acted more rudely, his childhood nightmares might resurface. You're blessed, you know. Take good care of Jean. Understand. It was true that Murakin had less to do compared to Misha. That's where the phrase "you're blessed" came from. Humph. I don't need to listen to your nagging. I can handle it on my own. It seems I have no choice. I hate to see you like this. Gilly. Yes, Miss Misha. For the next month, don't make strawberry pie for him. Got it. Huh. As if the strawberry pie would listen to your... I understand, Miss Misha. Murakin's face turned white in an instant. Well, everyone, let's meet again later. A week passed since Misha left. Murakin, who had regained his strength and was ecstatic, was seen sulking in a corner of the garden every day. It was because he couldn't eat strawberry pie. Although he hadn't had strawberry pie for over a month before, being forcibly deprived of it due to someone else's will was a terrible thing. Especially because of Misha. He's great, really. How could a dragon be like this? It seems like he's becoming more and more childish. Unable to watch any longer, Jean finally brought strawberry pies. Oh. As soon as Jean held out the strawberry pie, Murakin's complexion returned. No one could think of him as a black dragon who had existed for more than 3,000 years, a magnificent black dragon who had regained 40% of his power. Murakin, who received the basket with the strawberry pie, hugged Jean with a grateful face. Indeed, kid. There's no one like you. You've been worth raising. Murakin took out 2 strawberry pies and handed one to Jean. His hands were trembling, indicating that he was reluctant to share but was barely managing to do so. I'm good, you eat. Gulp. Murakin opened his mouth wide and bit into the strawberry pie. Jean watched him eat for a while. Sir Kashmir brought information about Lonnie. She was imprisoned for helping us. and was released just 2 days ago. Is that so? That's fortunate. Honestly, I don't want to admit it, but if she hadn't helped me, I wouldn't have been safe. I probably would have been captured by Cadden and dragged to Zipfel's lab. That guy. Thinking about it makes me angry. Right after Misha left, Murikin had said this. I owe that night. Jean had also been thinking about this, but it was surprising that Murikin expressed it directly. Why didn't you thank Misha, who cured you? Like that? If you knew what Misha did to me when she was young, you wouldn't say that. She's not a dragon. She's a demon. Anyway, it's about Lonnie. She doesn't seem to be doing very well. She's not doing well? Apparently, she changed drastically right after her punishment ended. She drinks like a recluse every day, and she caused a disturbance in the temple immediately after her release and was arrested again. So she's waiting for another trial for additional punishment. In the news from the previous life, Lonnie Salome was often described as a prodigal daughter. According to the information Kashmir brought, Lonnie was also turning into that state now. What? Is that woman's personality like that? Murikin had never had a proper conversation with Lonnie because he had fainted as soon as he met her. Not from my experience. The Dawn Guardians of Doctrine values discipline and order more than any other organization in the Holy Kingdom. So, even if a knight causes a little trouble, they are often expelled, but Lonnie hasn't been expelled yet. She's the adopted daughter of the Holy King. That's why. She got away with it, right? That could be. But when Lonnie caused a disturbance in the temple, the Holy King was performing a blessing ceremony for the citizens of the Holy Kingdom. In other words, she directly offended the Holy King. Despite the nickname King of Foolish Daughters, Micklin cherished his daughter very much, and Lonnie also obeyed Micklin well. After Santel, the girl went through a sudden change of heart. Is it like puberty? My guess is this. After Santel, Lonnie belatedly realized that the Holy King sided with Zipfel. So she felt a great sense of betrayal, and she is confused about her identity. The duty of someone like me is not to blind people's eyes, disguise evil as good, and become disgusting by colluding with power. Considering the firm religious belief that Lonnie showed, the story could be valid. After some contemplation, Murikin made eye contact with Jean. Whatever it is, I need to meet her once. I'll help as much as I can. My life must be worth that much, right? Chapter 233, Lonnie Salome, 2. December 14, 1797. Jean and Murikin arrived in the Holy Kingdom to meet Lonnie Salome. The Holy Kingdom of Vankella was in the midst of celebrating the festival called Advent Festival, which commemorated the day when the divine Princess Ayura, the patron deity of the Holy Kingdom, first arrived. It was the largest festival in the Holy Kingdom and lasted for an entire week. Colorful flags depicting the symbol of Ayura, the dormant volcano, adorned the streets. Dormant volcano, whenever I see it, I can't help but appreciate how well humans choose their symbols. Ayura, the goddess of peace, revered by the Holy Kingdom of Vankella. Murikin remembered that she was usually incredibly benevolent, but when angered, she had the personality to burn everything in her path. It is said that no matter which deity it was, if they caused chaos among mortals, Ayura would threaten them. There was even a time when she annihilated a deity, but it was before I was born. I wonder if the other party was the god of blessings. Is that so? There was a time when there were rumors circulating about Ayura being responsible for the disappearance of Numius, the god of hope, among the dragons. Anyway, she is quite a formidable figure. The streets were filled with pleasant melodies, laughter, and cheers. Both local residents and tourists who came to enjoy the festival were present, and even journalists could be seen frequently. And the largest gathering of people was in one place. In the center of the capital's main square, an elderly man with a graceful appearance stood on the podium, waving his hand towards the crowd. Wielding a golden scepter, wearing the crown of dormant volcano, and emanating a faint yellow aura that enveloped his entire body, King Micklin of Vankella exuded a bright smile with well-arranged teeth. Long live the king! Long live the king! The love of the citizens towards Micklin was absolute. As the king who shared the privileges of the aristocracy with the common people, he had done so much for the citizens of the Holy Kingdom that it would be difficult to find another monarch like him in the history of Vankella. Rather than praising the efforts of the nobles who established him as the king, he had instead granted even more privileges to the common people. The two men watched him from the square for a while. Is that person Micklin, Lonnie's father, the current king? Lower your voice, Murican. If anyone hears us, it could be troublesome. It just doesn't make sense to me. What's the matter? Lonnie recently caused a commotion in the temple during the blessing ceremony. But why would they insist on having Lonnie for an important event like the king's coronation? It doesn't add up. Perhaps it's about maintaining appearances? They say that she has been reading the blessing text on behalf of the king every year. That's one way to think about it, but it feels strangely uncomfortable. If, by any chance, Lonnie causes another scene during the coronation ceremony, it would be a major incident. It wouldn't be a minor accident that could be hidden like the previous incident. Lonnie's trial had been postponed due to the current king. However, it wasn't because the king had used his power to prevent her punishment. It was because of the Advent festival. During the Advent period, no criminals were judged as it was a tradition of the Holy Kingdom. However, Lonnie had always played an important role during the festival. The king's coronation ceremony. As the name suggested, it was a ritual in which the king personally blessed each and every citizen. It was considered the highlight of the Advent festival, and Lonnie had faithfully read the blessing text on behalf of the king every year since she was 15. Therefore, it seems that the members of the Dawn Guard temporarily released Lonnie. They probably thought it wouldn't look good if she suddenly disappeared. We might be able to meet Lonnie before the trial ends. Before Jean and Murican came to the Holy Kingdom, Kashmir had provided them with this information, which turned out to be good. If the trial didn't go well, it would have been difficult for them to meet her at all. Well, I still can't understand no matter how much I think about it. Just then, Jean looked at the king while eating a candy shaped like a dormant volcano that he had just bought from a stall. Both of them had disguised themselves as tourists, with their hair dyed red using a high-grade hair dye called Golden Duck Dye. What is it? Lonnie recently caused a disturbance at the temple during the blessing ceremony. However, it doesn't make sense to me why they would insist on using her for such an important event like the king's coronation. Isn't it because of appearances? They say she has been reading the blessing text every year on behalf of the king. But it still feels oddly unsatisfying. Maybe Lonnie was just momentarily insane at that time and still maintains a good relationship with the king. We'll find out when we meet her. Lonnie's residence was a small house located near the Ayura Grand Temple, which was right next to the capital of the Holy Kingdom. However, due to the constant visits from devoted followers of Micklin and Lonnie, the house was rarely used. Lonnie's actual living space was the Ayura Eastern Temple, located in the eastern part of the capital. However, it was currently undergoing major renovations, and except for authorized personnel, access was prohibited. Of course, Jean and Murican didn't care about such matters. Let's head to the Eastern Temple. The two men boarded the teleportation gate to the eastern part. Why are you still vomiting? Shouldn't you be used to it by now? Murican vomited immediately after the teleportation was complete. He was still sensitive to teleportation gates. Damn it! Even though I've regained 40% of my strength, I still can't fly freely. Hold on a bit. Once I become a rider, you should be able to fly freely over Hufster, at least. There was no need to search for the Ayura Eastern Temple. It was the tallest building that could be seen right after exiting the teleportation gate. Compared to the bustling central area filled with festival atmosphere, the eastern part was quiet. During the Advent period, even the merchants would leave for the central area to set up their stalls, so it was only natural. They climbed up the hill and arrived at the Ayura Eastern Temple. Unlike the heavily armored knights who blocked the city in Sentinel, the guards protecting the Eastern Temple were ordinary soldiers yawning and slouching. There were no workers visible for the temple's renovation. They had also left for the central area to enjoy the festival. Within the Holy Kingdom, there were no unauthorized individuals entering the temple, and from the perspective of tourists, there was nothing to see at the Ayura Eastern Temple. All the important relics had been moved to the central temple, so there was no need for strict security. Jean took out a small glass bottle from his pocket and opened the lid. Inside was a sleep-inducing poison made by Kazan. "I'm sorry, but it's not a dangerous poison." Jean looked at Murikin. Murikin initially had a face that seemed to question why he had to go this far. But then he sighed and transformed into a cat. Meow. Murikin approached the guards with the glass bottle in his mouth. Naturally, the guards' attention turned to the glass bottle that Murikin was holding before they could examine it closely. Before they could react, Murikin dropped the sleep-inducing poison in front of them. "What is this? Oh, my body!" Thump, thump. "Sorry." After giving them a few gold coins, Jean and Murikin casually passed through the gate and entered the temple. Lonnie's room was located at the end of the hallway on the 3rd floor of the temple. As they got closer, a strong smell of alcohol filled the air. Fortunately, there were no other soldiers inside, so they were able to meet Lonnie without any trouble. "Lonnie Salome, I didn't know you liked alcohol this much." As Jean quietly closed the door and spoke in a low voice, Lonnie finally looked at him. Despite intentionally approaching without hiding their presence, she hadn't paid any attention until that moment. It was as if she had given up on everything. Jean Runkendel? The eyes that were filled with strong conviction and pride back in Santel were now vacant, with pupils drowned in despair. For a while, Lonnie stared at Jean as if she couldn't believe it. It seemed that she hadn't expected him to find her so quickly. "How? We made a promise, didn't we? I came to repay the debt." Pop! Murikin transformed back into his human form and stood in front of Lonnie. Seeing him in a healthy state, Lonnie put down the bottle of alcohol and widened her eyes. "It's been a while, religious fanatic. Thanks to you, I'm alive and here to find you. It seems like there's something wrong with you, but this great black dragon Murikin will take care of everything. So, how about pouring me a drink?" Murikin smiled and effortlessly took the glass away from her, preventing her from drinking more. Lonnie, still in a daze, blinked her eyes for a while and then burst into tears. She covered her mouth to prevent her cries from being heard outside. The two of them waited for her to stop crying for a moment. "All right, stop crying and tell us what happened." My father. "Your father? King Miklin? They've captured my father." Jean and Murikin looked at each other and then at Lonnie in turns. "What are you talking about, religious fanatic? We just came from the central square after seeing the king standing there perfectly fine. Those guys used some kind of trickery. That's a fake. It's a body double with a striking resemblance. My actual father has been kidnapped." "What? The king has been kidnapped?" "Fake." As soon as they heard that word, a certain figure naturally came to mind. Bouvard Gaston, the sculptor of Kinselo. In that instant, Jean understood why Lonnie had been assigned the role of reading the blessing text during the king's coronation ceremony as always. She's being threatened. The current King Miklin was being held hostage, and those who were responsible were blackmailing Lonnie. They told her that if she didn't behave as usual, her father, the real Miklin, would die. However, in her distress, Lonnie caused a disturbance during the blessing ceremony at the fake king's coronation and became trapped in a situation where she had to wait for the trial. "Lonnie Salome, do you know who kidnapped the king?" "Kinselo." Of course, Jean had expected that name to come up since they were using Bouvard's shapeshifting technique. But the name Lonnie mentioned was not Kinselo. "It's Zipfel. Those guys kidnapped my father." "Zipfel? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It seems like other forces are involved as well. I don't really know. I had very little I could do." Lonnie held her head in her hands and trembled. "It's okay, Lonnie. Have some water to drink. Calm down and tell us the whole story so we can think properly." The alliance between Zipfel and Kinselo had come to an end. Could it be that they joined forces again? That moment a question arose briefly. Thump, 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 thump. Suddenly, a heavy footsteps could be heard from outside the door. It was undoubtedly someone who had realized that Jean and Murikin had infiltrated and had come to find them. But for some reason, these footsteps They were clearly not the sound of human footsteps. Chapter 234. Lonnie Salome 3. What else could it be, if not human? A demonic creature, a beast, or something else? In any case, the heavy footsteps sounded quite hostile, and Murakin looked towards the closed door. Boy! Take care of the religious fanatic star. Asterisk. It seems to be Lonnie Salame's nickname, coined by Murakin. However, Murakin still didn't let go of his glass. I'll handle it. I don't know what it is, but make sure to handle it quietly. Sure. The footsteps halted right in front of Lonnie's door. Murakin opened the door with a smile. Or at least he tried to smile. But his expression froze immediately. The source of the footsteps walked on two legs. It had arms and legs, but it was neither human nor a demonic creature. If it had to be classified, it was a powerless and unfortunate human. Jean had encountered such beings in Colin's historical sites before becoming a provisional flag-bearer. Biological golems? Suddenly, the faces of the soldiers Murakin had drugged to sleep, the ordinary faces of the two people who had just stood guard peacefully, came to Jin's mind. Those people didn't deserve to go through something like this. Wasn't any different when he first encountered the biological golems in Colin. The unconscious mercenaries had suddenly turned into biological golems and started attacking Jean. The mercenaries had pleaded with him then to please kill them. Zipple, those lunatics! Jean clenched his teeth. At that very moment, the knife-like nails of the biological golems swerved toward Murakin's face. The strike was quick and fierce. The research seemed to have made great strides in the few years since Colin. If Murakin hadn't regained his former powers, he might have allowed one or two small scratches. But now, the attack was as slow as a passing cloud in Murakin's eyes. Swish! Murakin straightened his hand like a sword and lightly swung his arm, slashing the forearms of his enemy. Murakin extended his hand again before the arms could touch the ground. Crunch! Murakin coated his hands black with shadow energy and aimed at the lower abdomen of the biological golems, realizing that's where their cores, or hearts, were located. TSK, I can't let you live like this. Murakin clenched his fists gently and crushed the hearts of the biological golems. They couldn't even let out a scream. Once their hearts were shattered, their bloated bodies quickly shrank. There was no trace of their human origins in the piece of blackened leather they left behind. Jean, Murakin, and Lonnie silently gazed at the remains for a few seconds. Obviously, Lonnie was the most surprised of the three. She snorted a couple of times but soon calmed her trembling body as she remembered her own identity. She was the adopted daughter of the Holy King, a holy knight of the Creed Guardian Society, a sacred subject of the Holy Kingdom, and Ayula's daughter. Lonnie took out the scriptures from her inner pockets and knelt beside the golems. "O Ayula, my poor brethren have found peace and journeyed to you. Please have mercy on their souls. Console them in their pitiful and untimely death." A bright yellow light flowed from her and enveloped the dead bodies. Whoosh! The light soon transformed into Ayula's sacred flame and reduced the corpses to ashes. Lonnie suppressed her urge to vomit and even delivered a brief eulogy. Now she seemed to have regained control. The golem hearts that Murakin had shattered remained on the floor. Damn biological golems, huh? I know I just saw it, but I can't believe it. How can you have things like this in the Holy Kingdom? Don't tell me we're in the wrong country. Murakin spoke as he picked up one of the fragments. Jean also examined the fragments closely. There was a bluish aura shining within. It gave off a chilling and eerie sensation, but it wasn't the right time to discuss it. Lonnie Salome, I think we should move to a safer place for now. More people will be sent soon. Lonnie closed her eyes. Then she nodded as she opened them again. I understand. Follow me. They stepped into the empty hallway. They followed Lonnie. However, they never left the Eastern Temple. Once they discover that I'm gone, there will be no place to hide within the Holy Kingdom. This might be a safer place. Lonnie began climbing the gigantic Ayula statue adorning the central wall of the ground floor. No one would imagine that I, of all people, would climb up Ayula's body. Besides, not many people know about this secret passage either. She was skilled in hiding and concealing objects from a young age. Since becoming the adopted daughter of the Holy King, she had been exposed to excessive harassment and all sorts of undue expectations from others, which naturally developed her hiding abilities. Lani forcefully turned the head of the gigantic stone statue. Then they pushed Ayula's head aside, revealing a hollow space inside the statue. They entered the statue and placed the head back in its original position. The interior was pitch black. The inside of the statue was connected to a hidden passageway in the basement that led to the drains of the Eastern Temple. They walked for a few minutes and reached the drain. Suddenly, Lani staggered and grabbed onto the wall. She was hyperventilating. Her heart was shattered by the fact that the faith she had built throughout her life had proven to be wrong. His father, Miklin, the Holy King, had been captured by the Zippel, and Vankila had become so corrupted that it could no longer be called the Holy Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom has ended. Jean didn't respond. He just looked into her eyes. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. He could certainly understand why, but there was nothing he could do to console her. How could Jean comfort someone who had lost their only family, their kingdom, and their own faith? But Jean could provide practical help. Choose Lani Salome. If you're completely exhausted and have no heart for revenge, I can send you to a land where you can live your life peacefully, without asking questions. I guarantee your safety for the rest of your life, and I'll also provide you with enough money to sustain you. All you have to do is leave this place with us, right now. Jean then looked into Lani's eyes. But if not, gather yourself and give us some useful information, so we can at least help you with something immediately. About how many enemies there are when they started controlling the Holy Kingdom, or how many people we can still trust within the Holy Kingdom. That's true that I helped both of you in Sant-El, but I can't ask you to save my father and fight against the Zippel based on just that. Why not? Lani couldn't respond for some time. Would you risk your life for me and for the Holy Kingdom? Seriously? You a run candle? Yes, I am a run candle. Therefore, the Zippel were always my enemies to begin with. And when I offer to help you, it's partly to repay your kindness, but the other reason is to win the Holy Kingdom to my side. Letting the Holy Kingdom fall into the hands of the Zippel is a loss for me and my clan in the end. Well, hey brat, that's true but a bit ruthless to say. Imagine how the confused religious fanatic present here must feel, right? Murakan said. Then you should start acting in your own best interests as well. What I propose is an exchange as the successor of the Run Candles, and you as the successor of the Holy King. Silence followed. Murakan read Jin's intentions and looked at Lani with serious eyes. They were already getting used to the stench of the drain when Lani spoke up. I hope you'll excuse the embarrassing state I've been in until now, Jean Run Candle. Well, I'll follow you. I'll exchange with the Run Candles. Many changes occurred within Lani in that brief moment. This provisional flag-bearer of the Run Candles was clearly much younger than her, and it was impossible for him to love the Holy Kingdom more than she did. But he was more concerned about the future and well-being of the kingdom than she was. It embarrassed her to think this way. Fine. Let me decide my part of the deal after rescuing the Holy King or expelling the Zippel from the Holy Kingdom. What you gain is an army in the form of Murakan and me. This guy, in particular, has become much stronger since the first time you saw him. Jean let out a sigh of relief. If Lani had given up and asked him to abandon the kingdom, he would have had to start from scratch. On the other hand, if he managed to drive the Zippel out of the Holy Kingdom, not only would he be helping someone he owed a favor to, but he would also have a lot to say about it in his clan. First, let me tell you what I've found out about the current situation. Over the past few years, the Zippel had been working to win over influential figures and organizations in the Holy Kingdom, one by one. The Creed Guardians Society, the Order of Holy Knights to which Lani Salome belonged, was the first organization to become a servant of the Zippel. That's why my father sent me to the society. He had no one he could trust there, and he sent me to join their organization to investigate. I think my father himself was quite unsure about it, until recently. Then the Holy King would have reached his conclusion upon receiving your report on the Sant-El incident, right? Yes, The Zippel captured my father just after he received my report. At first, they also tried to deceive me with the fake double. It can mimic everything my father does, from his words to his actions. But there was something that only the closest people to the Holy King knew. The king couldn't move the pinky finger of his left hand. Lonnie had already sensed the decline of her father's sacred powers when she saw the fake double using the left pinky while dining. When Lonnie brought up the issue, the Zippel cut off the Holy King's left pinky finger and had a holy knight around Lonnie's age, someone she used to trust, deliver it to her room, no less. That was when Lonnie fell into despair. What sick thing! Those perverted bastards. Did you keep the finger? Jean asked, but Lonnie shook her head. After I saw it, the finger burst into flames and disappeared. The flames seal. Only Shinu's relatives can perform that spell. It's the work of Kiliak Zippel or Kadin. They were up against the Zippel. And of all people it had to be their patriarch, Kiliak. Although Murakin had regained his strength, it was impossible for him alone to take on the entire Zippel clan. However, even though they couldn't match them in physical battles, they could deal a blow by influencing public opinion. The Holy King's finger had disappeared, but Jean still carried with him the shard of the biological golem's heart. Biological golems and transfiguration. Those things will drag you down. Jean took out the fragment from his pocket. Lonnie realized what he meant. Are you going to use that as evidence to claim that the Zippel turned the soldiers of the Holy Kingdom into biological golems? Yes. But I'm the only witness. No. I also disrupted their experiments with biological golems in the past. A great journalist is already waiting to testify and cover the matter. What do you mean? But that won't be enough. We'll need other irrefutable evidence to uncover the Zippel and expose them all at once. Who else knows about the Holy King's condition in his left pinky finger? Chapter 235. Lonnie Salome 4. Of course, the shard of the biological golem's heart alone was not enough to begin waging wars of public opinion, even with Dino Jaglin and the Colonites behind them. The minimum requirement to incite public anger against the Zippel was to demonstrate their role in the kidnapping of the Holy King and the placement of a puppet in his stead to deceive the citizens of the Holy Kingdom. The Pontiff Montiano, Pontiff Canu, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Sacred Knights, Sir Ventura, are aware, Lonnie said. Who is the most trustworthy among them? No one. Lonnie responded sharply and continued. Pontiffs Montiano and Canu are definitely sold out. When I realized that the double was impersonating my father, I went to talk to them. But they just laughed and wished me luck in the trial that would take place after the festival, telling me to serve the king well. I can definitely say that they have been bought. It can't be known for certain with nothing else but that, don't you think? No, I'm sure. I also brought up my father's finger. They just smiled instead of giving a response, as if saying that I am completely under their control anyway. Lonnie was particularly devastated by their betrayal. Montiano and Canu had been Miklin's closest friends, whom he had known since his adolescence, and they were the highest authorities in the Holy Kingdom, surpassed only by Miklin himself. I lost all hope when I became certain of their betrayal because Montiano is the supreme pontiff of the legislation in the Holy Kingdom and Canu of the administration. The laws of the land and their enforcement were completely under their control. And with the king being a fake double, things were certainly grim. A thought struck Jean. The Holy Kingdom has fallen under Zippel's control. What are the run candles doing about it? Are we aware of the situation and letting it happen? Or are we still unaware of the current state? The latter was more likely. The news of Murakin and Kadin's battle in Santel had not yet reached the rest of the world. Since Santel was nothing more than a small remote town under the control of the feudal states of Shoal, the run candles did not have anyone planted in the city. Jean only became aware of the situation because Murakin was attacked in Santel, and ended up meeting Lonnie there. If it hadn't been for that series of coincidences, he would never have learned about the state of the Holy Kingdom. And the commander, Sir Ventura? He was the last person who knew about the state of the Holy King. Among the three who were aware of the king's physical disability, he was the only one who was against the king. I still don't know Sir Ventura, but he has a long history of political enmity against my father. He used to make extreme statements, claiming that my father should be stripped of his title. Is that why you decided not to meet with him? And he always claimed that we should be on better terms with the Zippel. I used to think he said those things out of spite for my father, but it seems he has been on the Zippel side for a long time. The military, legislative, and executive bodies are all in their hands now. This seems quite grim, kid. We should meet with Vitura. Did you hear what I just said? I heard it. But unlike the two pontiffs, you haven't spoken with Vitura yet. Have you? My father also hated him. In fact, Sir Vitura used to get on my father's nerves even at official events. My father used to complain and try to leave Sir Vitura out of his banquet invitations. One had to hate the other passionately if they were to do such things as the leader of a nation, and even more so as the Holy King. Lani was also influenced by her father. She didn't like Vitura either. No, in fact, she despised him. Jean looked Lani in the eyes as if he had just come up with something. Lani, how did your father treat Pontiffs Montiano and Canu? Well, obviously, he always had them sit by his side, both at banquets and meetings, and always deferred to their advice in governance. In his free time, he also took walks with them. What would you do if you were the Holy Queen, Lani? If the Holy Kingdom was being sold out to the Zippel completely like now? What? If I were him, I would keep close to my enemy's spies, so that they wouldn't know that I found out. On the other hand, I would remain hostile to anyone who could help me, at least on the outside. Lani blinked silently but then shook her head. That might be possible. But my father used to complain about Sir Vitura very often, even when we were alone. It could be interpreted as his suspicion that there are eavesdroppers within the castle. Of course, it's only a supposition. But it won't do us any harm to find out. What if I get captured while visiting him? If Sir Vitura is a puppet of the Zippel, he will undoubtedly detain me. They probably decided that I wouldn't escape because they had my father's life in their hands. But now, they will think that I escaped after killing their biological golem soldiers. Murakan shrugged at her response. Why would anyone worry about being captured when I'm around? Do you think the Holy Kingdom's knights could ever stop me? Lani didn't know how strong Murakan had become. It was to be expected, given that her only memory of him was his struggle to stay alive after being defeated by Cadden. The question wasn't whether Murakan could overpower Vitura and his knights or not. That's not the issue. Let's say you two can overpower the sacred knights and escape with me. What happens next? We will be on the most wanted list, and my father, Lani couldn't finish her sentence. The Zippel had a single purpose in keeping Lani alive after capturing the Holy King. They wanted to use the image of the beloved Holy King and his daughter, admired by the people of the kingdom. That's why they wanted Lani to read the consecration message at the Ayula Manifestation Festival as usual, with the discreet threat of killing her father if she didn't do well or caused problems like before. But objectively speaking, it was highly unlikely that the true Holy King was still alive. They practically had the Holy Kingdom under their control and had the perfect double to play his role. They had no reason to keep him alive. As for Lani, she was a disposable option they could use until the people turned their backs on her, witnessing her mental collapse. My father, he's probably no longer in this world. Lani understood this fact. She had only ignored it because she didn't want to imagine that possibility. Tears filled her eyes. She wiped away the tears and clenched her teeth. Tears wouldn't change anything. I'll go meet with Sir Vitura, as Lord Jean suggested. But promise me one thing. Speak. You sound like you want to turn public opinion against them. But if Sir Vitura is a traitor like I believe he is, then it will be impossible to drive them out with nothing but public sentiment. I'm sure that's why you also seek to meet with Sir Vitura. As Lani mentioned, there was a slight possibility that Vitura was indeed a traitor. And if that was true, Jean had to involve other factions in the matter. He thought of the Hidden Palace or the Nameless. Or he could break Runcandle's code of conduct and seek help from Luna. Jean was also interested in preventing the Holy Kingdom from falling into Zippel's hands, no matter the cost. So, if things go wrong, Help me restore the Holy Kingdom after becoming the flag-bearer. With that, I'm asking for more than just you and Murakan. I'm asking for the support of the entire Runcandle clan, Lonnie said. Jean nodded. I understand. Calling Vitura was impossible. Although Lonnie was indeed the adopted daughter of the king in terms of rank, she was only a second-class knight of the Creed Guardian Society. The three of them contemplated this for a while and finally decided to visit his mansion themselves. Whether he was a traitor or not, it didn't matter if they met him at the mansion or elsewhere. The result would be the same. Well, if it isn't Lonnie Salome, the daughter of His Mighty Holiness, the Holy King, and the troublemaker from the Creed Guardian Society. Vitura was arrogantly seated in the center of his vast office, with a mocking smile on his face. Behind him stood the Golden Shield Knights, a group of sacred knights under his direct control. They stared fixedly at the three. And who are these two? Vitura asked, pointing at Jean and Murakan. They're my friends. Friends? Ha! They must be the vagabonds who killed my soldiers in the Eastern Temple and escaped with you. Hoo-hoo, Lonnie Salome. You see, I've been looking for you. You must read the consecration message a few days from now. You can't just disappear. You know? We're finished. Jean and Murakan immediately thought the same thing. It seemed that Lonnie was right. Damn it. To think that the Holy King despised him because he was actually a spy for Zippel. Did the Holy King truly lose his power so helplessly, completely oblivious to everything? However, Murakan had regained 40% of his powers, so escaping wouldn't be very difficult. You should have known that you could easily incur your father's death by acting this way. It seems you came to your senses while you were busy running away. Huh? Nevertheless, you made the right decision. Sit down. Lonnie sat across from Vitura with an emotionless gaze. Jean and Murakan stayed in their places, trying to find the best moment to escape. Vitura smiled as he poured himself a cup of tea. Cain. Yes, Commander. The sacred knight named Cain stepped forward and responded. Take those two and lock them up in the dungeon cells. I have a lot to ask them. And tell the Zippel that we've secured Lonnie. Yes, sir. Cain and the other three sacred knights immediately headed towards Jean and Murakan. They had surrendered their weapons before entering the mansion, though it didn't suggest that they would have trouble against these knights. It's going to be a hassle finding my sword on the way out, because... Huh? A sword emitted a sharp sound, as it was unsheathed. But it wasn't the Golden Shield Knights who had unsheathed their swords. It was Vitura Velter, the commander-in-chief of the Sacred Knights. It was the sound of his favorite sword being unsheathed. And surprisingly, his sword slashed at his own subordinates, who had passed by him. His single strike pierced through the four necks of the Golden Shield Knights. Their helmet-clad heads fell and rolled on the floor with a metallic sound. Since the Golden Shield Knights were sacred knights under his direct command, they were all skilled swordsmen of 5 to 7-star levels. But there was no way they could block the sword of their own commander, which was wielded swiftly behind them, especially since the commander in question was a knight of levels nearing the 9 stars. The headless bodies of the sacred knights twitched. Don't scream, Lonnie. And seriously, you made the right decision by coming to me. You must have suffered a lot all this time. Surprised, Lonnie stood up, but Vitura quickly covered her mouth. Jean and Murakan could only stare at Vitura in astonishment. The commander-in-chief of Vanquilla's sacred knights, Vitura Velter, was not a puppet of the Zippel. Please, come forward, Lord Jean Runcandle. In fact, he even knew who Jean was. Chapter 236. Individual Study, Group Study 1. I had no idea you would recognize me, Sir Vitura. Jean spoke as he approached. I attended the enemy's celebration. I stayed in a corner and only drank alone. So it's no surprise you didn't see me there. Vitura's eyes seemed bitter as he looked at the Golden Shield Knights he had killed. Even a large portion of the sacred knights under my direct control have defected to your side. Lonnie, I'm grateful that you weren't injured in this mess. Sir Vitura, I had questioned your loyalty. Please forgive me. Lonnie bowed as she spoke. Vitura made a gesture of apology. I would have done the same since your father and I have been hostile towards each other for a long time. In fact, I was always the first to say that we should side with the Zippel. The Holy King, Miklin, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Sacred Knights, Vitura Velter. Both were known to be enemies for a long time, and they had indeed engaged in quite furious debates in the National Council. But it was all just the roles they played to maintain political balance. Miklin played the benevolent role of squeezing those in power, while Vitura played the wicked role of representing them. The conflicts that arose between them since Miklin's coronation were actually a collaboration between them, and only the two of them were aware of this agreement. There was a long history behind it. But Vitura thought that now wasn't the time to explain those things to Lonnie. They had to talk about the current situation. Lonnie, soon the Zippel will receive news of your visit and Lord Jin's. There aren't many people in the mansion who obey me without question, and even they are being watched. The Zippel must think you're on their side, Sir Vitura. Vitura nodded. They must have the impression that I was the first to side with them. They started planting spies in the Holy Kingdom 20 years ago. Back then, Jean hadn't even been born. He was expelled from his clan in the past life, with no access to any information. What he didn't know was that the Holy Kingdom had also fallen into Zippel's hands at that time. The Holy Kingdom is currently divided into two. On one side supporting the Zippel and the other opposing them? No, between those supporting the Zippel and those supporting Kinselo. The fake double of the Holy King is Kinselo's doing. I still can't believe it, but Kinselo seems to have a transfigurer among them. Lonnie's eyes widened. The Holy Kingdom was not only invaded by Zippel, but it was also under the influence of Kinselo. She was more than surprised. In fact, she thought that Kinselo was a third-rate terrorist group, incomparable to the Zippel clan. Anyone with such ideas would have reacted like her if they were told that half of the Holy Kingdom was under Kinselo's control. Jean didn't show much reaction, and Murakin simply shrugged. You don't seem very surprised by the mention of Kinselo, Lord Jean, nor does your knight. I'm not a wretched knight. Murakin considered saying this aloud but decided against it. I was attacked by some transfigured ones on the day I departed for the Sword Garden. They were Zippel extremists. After that, I started tracking their identities and found out that Kinselo and Zippel had formed an alliance. You went through something like that? I see. But they're not together anymore. They had been allies until some time ago, but recently they turned their backs on each other for some unknown reason. Vitura had been observing the state of affairs while pretending to serve the Zippel clan. But there wasn't much he could do since the reigning pontiffs Montiano, Canu, and the others, along with their organizations, were all in total submission to Zippel. So, when the two allied forces became hostile towards each other, Vitura thought that the only opportunity to reclaim the Holy Kingdom was within reach. He hoped that their grip on the Holy Kingdom would weaken. But instead, the Holy Kingdom was divided, along with the struggle between the two factions. The softliners allied with the Zippel, and the hardliners with the Kinselo. The traitors believe that Kiliak Zippel and the leader of Kinselo are bigger than Ayula. I haven't seen the leader of Kinselo myself, but Kiliak seemed to have enough power to make the weak in faith find him quite convincing. Even after his loyalty came to an end, the two factions decided to hold onto their semi-domains over the Holy Kingdom and pursue their own interests. There were a few loyal servants like Vitura, but their number was far outnumbered by the traitors. The struggle to reclaim the Holy Kingdom was futile if neither the softliners nor the hardliners were interested in it. Vitura continued with his rapid briefing session. Meanwhile, the bodies of the slain Golden Shield Knights began to emit the smell of blood. When did the experiments with biological golems begin? When we went to secure Lonnie at the Eastern Temple, we fought against soldiers of the Holy Kingdom turned into these golems. Jean took out the fragment of the biological golem's heart from his pocket. Oh, great Ayula! Your children suffer such terrible fates. Vitura held the fragment, and his whole body trembled. They started their experiments in the Holy Kingdom about 6 months ago. Over 100 civilians and soldiers of the Holy Kingdom are captured and sent to their location every month to be used as test subjects. Lonnie was horrified. The fact that she was oblivious to such things happening right under her nose made her feel like she could lose her mind. Lonnie, it's not your fault. It's ours, your father's and mine. We both missed the moment to tell you these things. By their location, do you mean the Lutero-Magical Federation? Jean naturally thought that the experiments with biological golems were the work of the Zippel. They're not the Zippel. It's the work of Kinslow. But unlike in Colin, the experiments with biological golems conducted on the people of the Holy Kingdom were the work of Kinslow. Is Kinslow conducting biological experiments with golems? Kinslow was deeply related to the Half-Men. The prominent combat tribes among them, like the White Werewolves and Crimson Tigers, took orders from Kinslow's leader. Jean recalled that the fragment of the golem hearts had accumulated a blue aura, which gave him a creepy feeling. Kinslow, those bastards, are they trying to recreate the legends? The hearts of the biological golems in the Holy Kingdom were somewhat similar to the light hearts of the legends. Murakin seemed to think the same. He leaned forward to get a better look at the fragment. But how? By what means? My brothers vanished completely from the human world 5,000 years ago. There are no stories of the light heart being passed down through generations, and the technique of the sort of legends was completely. Jean was thinking about that when he remembered an article from a newsletter. The article was about Bammel, who was actually him using lightning. Then he remembered the Kinslow agents who survived at that time, all witnesses to the technique of the sort of legends. It can't be just because of that, right? An indescribably unsettling and ominous feeling weighed on Jin's downcast heart. The Kinslow have been taking the citizens of the Holy Kingdom to Old Otyrium. It was the headquarters of the Dark Magic Guild and the place where Ryal Zippel's legacy rested. Biological golem experiments were carried out there. Are the Zippel capturing people and experimenting on them too? Not for now, at least. The Zippel showed signs of attempting to use our sacred relics and the relics of the demons we guard, but they didn't use our people for experiments. That's probably the result of their decision to gain favor with the public when they have to fight against Kinslow to become the sole owners of the Holy Kingdom. That's how those hypocrites operate. Vitura nodded with a heavy heart. However, he was also quite surprised. Jean only needed a few sentences to accurately deduce something that Vitura had concluded after many years of observation. Well, damn. Look, Holy Knight Chief. How is it that you've never once sought help from the Run Candle or the other factions when things are already such a mess? Murakin said in frustration. Vitura sighed in response. If the Run Candle were to join at this point, what would be left of this land? Jean thought they had acted wisely. The Zippel and the Kinslow would only try to discreetly control the Holy Kingdom. But the Run Candle would have seized the opportunity to start a total war, turning the Holy Kingdom into a wasteland and taking away the highly skilled healing saints and the objects from the eternal safe. To be precise, what the Run Candle needed was not Vankila, the neutral kingdom. It was the healing ability of the saints and some valuable objects they desired. You're right, kid. What are you thinking? Murakin asked. Jean had his arms crossed and fell into a brief silence. I'm thinking of a way to drive both the Zippel and Kinslow out of this place without great sacrifice. Jean started racking his brains as soon as he learned that it was actually the Kinslow who were behind the biological golem experiments, not the Zippel. He was thinking of a way to mess them up for good. What? I have an idea. We should be grateful that the Kinslow are still unknown to the public. Sir Vitura? Yes, speak, Lord Jean. Everyone making decisions in the Holy Kingdom is either a traitor or loyal to the kingdom but without power. Like you. Am I right? Yes. But the people don't know anything about it. They must not be aware that 100 or even more citizens of the kingdom are being used as experiments every month. Vitura's eyes began to widen. Are you going to reveal that to the public? Yes. But no one will believe the plain truth, so we'll need some evidence. I'll go with this guy to Otyrium and rescue the captured citizens. I also thought of doing that, but there are many 8- or 9-star wizards from Kinslow in the area. Yes, I know. They are the wizards of the Dark Magic Guild, under the umbrella of the Kinslow organization. I've also done a lot of research on the matter. But are you sure you two can rescue the people alone? The question begged to be asked, but Vitura decided to listen first. The rescued citizens will be the most powerful evidence of all this. But unfortunately, the inhabitants of Old Otyrium are unlikely to be in their natural state. They would have already been turned into biological golems or be in the process of transformation. Then, do you mean to reveal the truth to the people of the Holy Kingdom by showing their states? That was the best option if they could only bring back the people who were captured to be subjects of experimentation. However, with the current number of loyal forces to the kingdom, reaching Otyrium itself was utterly impossible. Yes, that's my plan. And all the responsibility will fall on the Zippel, rather than Kinslow, because I will claim that I rescued the people from the fourth magic tower of the Zippel clan. The fourth magic tower of the Zippel clan? But that would be a lie. It wouldn't matter if it's a lie or not. Once the news spreads that people from the Holy Kingdom have been captured and even sacrificed for biological golem experiments, the Zippel will have to speak up. It will be much harder to control the people once they fall from grace. People were unaware that the Holy Kingdom had already fallen to the Zippel. But once it was revealed that the Zippel had conducted experiments on their people, the Zippel would have to make a tremendous effort to stabilize a land they already had in their grasp. It was not something they could turn a blind eye to, as they were supposedly the defenders of justice, at least in appearance. The lie would be exposed if the master of the fourth tower speaks up about it. But it seems he has a plan, Lord Jean. Currently, the master of the fourth tower, Karl Zippel, is not in the Lutero-Magical Federation. He is being held hostage by the Kinslow. But you see, Kinslow is currently known as a third-rate terrorist organization. If Jean entered the Holy Kingdom with the people he had rescued, the Zippel would be forced to make a decision. Either admit that Kiliak's son, Karl Zippel, is being held captive by an unknown third-rate terrorist group, or assume the blame of Kinslow and be accused of the biological golem experiments. The former would damage their power reputation, and the latter their justice reputation. So we will crush Kinslow with force and the Zippel with reason. Chapter 237. Individual Study, Group Study 2. The Zippel will probably choose to take the blame. A clan of such influence, especially one like Zippel that imposed its power over the entire world, would never sacrifice its power reputation. Although their reputation as a clan defending justice and goodness would be tarnished, it was better to take the blame with a few people they could dismiss as scapegoats. They could always rebuild their image of being good. However, once the power reputation of a clan was questioned, it would take a tremendous effort to restore it. Even more so with an urgent competitor like the Runcandle clan. The fourth master of the Zippel Tower is currently held hostage by Kinslow. I set a trap and convinced Chukon Tolder, a Kinslow wizard, to keep him as a hostage. Jean added a brief description of the compass interception operation, omitting the compass part, of course, leaving Vitura speechless. So that's why you plan to use Karl Zippel, the fourth tower master of the Zippel clan. Now I understand your intentions. If everything goes as you say, Zippel will choose to take the blame instead of Kinslow. Of course, things may not go exactly as I intend, but I believe it's the best plan we have. It will bring to the surface the current state of the Holy Kingdom and lay the groundwork for pursuing them. Vitura didn't know what to say. He had originally planned to lead the last knights remaining loyal to the kingdom in their final battle. His ultimate goal was to save Lonnie in the process and seek protection from the Runcandle clan, the Hidden Palace, or the Nameless. Whether Lonnie chose to cling to the bleak hope of the kingdom to await its future or simply live her life in hiding, that decision would be solely hers. But then Jean arrived. Maybe it was Ayula who sent us this boy. Despite being a Runcandle, he was just a reserve flag-bearer who had not yet turned 20. Vitura would have never asked him for help in any other circumstances, no matter how brilliant he was, because he would have thought Jean was too young to handle such matters. Lord Jean, please speak, Sir Vitura. Please tell me what Lonnie and I should do from now on. I will head to Old Otyrium immediately. Sir Vitura, you will continue to act as a puppet of the Zippel clan and protect Lonnie until I return. You must not hand her over to anyone. She is highly likely to be drugged or tortured. The Zippel and Kinslow would still want to keep Lonnie close as the centerpiece of the final ceremony for the false Holy King's Manifestation Festival. Therefore, They would do everything possible to ensure that Lonnie obeyed their orders, especially after her escape record. You can leave that to me. And please make a list of the traitors who have allied with Kinslow and the Zippel so that we can expose them as soon as I return. Lastly, gather the remaining loyal ones. There may be a confrontation in the process. Understood. Lonnie approached Jean. Our brief encounter has put the fate of all Vankila in your hands. All I can do right now is sit here and pray for your safe return. But I promise to repay you for the kindness you have shown us. Hey, look, religious fanatic. You can thank us after we bring the rescued ones here. Just sit here and wait in fervent prayers. And your name was Vitura, right? I'm going to need you to act like you've been beaten so we can leave now, Murakan said. Schluck. Before Jean could react, Vitura suddenly cut his own arm. Lonnie was horrified. She immediately raised her sacred powers, but Vitura shook his head and pushed her away. The deaths of the Golden Shield Knights would be impossible to explain if he himself was not injured. Sir Vitura, there was no need for you to cut your arm. Vitura handed his own sword to Jean. Take my sword and escape. Your swords are in the wooden box in the central hallway on the ground floor. As soon as you leave through that door, I will send a group to chase after you. I will be back before the manifestation festival ends. I wish you luck. Fortunately, they retrieved Jin's swords and slipped away from their pursuers. It took them a whole day to leave the Holy Kingdom because they were immediately included in the wanted list, preventing the use of portals. They had 5 days until the manifestation festival came to an end. Jean had to rescue the captives and return to the Holy Kingdom within those 5 days. The schedule was quite tight. Murakan's massive wings sliced through the winds. Otyrium did not belong to the Lutero Magical Federation and posed no restrictions on Murakan's flight. The land had turned into a fallen wasteland after the battle for the Holy Kingdom. Otyrium was now an unprotected region infested with demonic creatures, and also the operating base of the Dark Magic Guild. Although Jean had joined the ranks of the powerful by mastering the Shadow Blade and the technique of the Sword of Legends, he was not strong enough to take down the place alone. Cole Joe, Andre Zippel's nemesis and brother of Ralt Joe, whom Jean had defeated, was there. The same applied to Fedrin Hansirk, the Grand Elder of Vermont Academy, Chukon Tolderer, the Grand Wizard of Ans, and Suzanne Lalista, the matriarch of the Lalista clan. These 4 figures were the 9-star wizards of the Dark Magic Guild. Jin's group didn't even have an estimate of the number of 7- and 8-star wizards there, and they didn't know what kind of traps awaited them. Are you getting nervous, kid? Murakan said. Jean chuckled. Why would I be? I have you by my side. Kuhaha. That's right. There's no need to fear the hordes of those wretched wizards when I'm around. 40%, that was the amount of power Murakan had regained thanks to Misha. Would Murakan be able to take them all down on his own if all the 9-star wizards were there? Of course, it was unlikely that all the 9-star wizards would be present in the area at once. Except for Cole Joe, the rest were leaders of their clans and organizations. They were unlikely to be at the Dark Magic Guild's base unless something required their presence. Well, I'm sure we'll find out. He's confident enough. It seems he can handle it. It was a moonless night. The land beneath them was pitch black. Who would have thought that the base of the Dark Magic Guild was in the middle of this abandoned land, completely uninhabited and without a single speck of light? An unidentified demonic creature howled somewhere below. Murakan began to increase his flying speed. Kid, it seems we're close. Haha. The human mages did something clever here. Something clever? They created a barrier. Something that creates illusions and serves as an alarm as well. Really? Well, I knew they would have some kind of barrier. Do you think you can neutralize it? Then Murakan burst into laughter once again. We just broke through it. Hee hee. Don't you realize it? You're lying. Jean was about to say this, but he turned and gasped. There were traces of barriers in the air they had just passed through. Hidden magic circles were broken and floating in the air. There were so many that Jean couldn't even count them all. How many magic circles are those? And did they go through all of them without making any noise? A dark form of energy contrasted with the magic circles that shone like stars. It was the trail of shadow energy that Mirakan had used to break down the barriers. And the mass of shadow energy was continuously expanding, absorbing magic circles around it. The wizards of the Dark Magic Guild had established themselves in Otirium 50 years ago. Over the course of 5 decades, countless wizards had poured their mana into maintaining this gigantic barrier, but it proved to be no better than an ordinary castle wall against Mirakan. You simply released that amount of shadow energy without any preparation? And what is that? It's insane. There's more than just one mass. There. It wasn't just the place they had passed through. Jean didn't realize when Mirakan had placed them, but similar masses of shadow energy were scattered throughout the sky. The gigantic barrier was being erased by the shadow energy, as if it were mold. Jean could only stare at the back of Mirakan and the sky with his jaw dropped. Don't be surprised now by such petty tricks. Aren't you supposed to be the Millennium Contractor, remember? You can do it too, right? Yes, of course. Given enough time, I can create a hole on one side of the barrier too. Jean didn't say that out loud. The gigantic barrier of the Dark Magic Guild had been completely erased, leaving no trace of it. Ah, now I see. That castle must be the base of those ugly guys. A tall castle standing amidst the dark plains was revealed once the barrier was lifted. The mages in the castle had no idea that the massive barrier had disappeared. Kid. Yes. Let's attack them immediately. The experiment victims won't be in the outer walls. I'll break down the outer wall. Infiltrate inside and locate the captives. Once you find them, shoot a flare immediately. Understood. But if we encounter civilians who are not from the Holy Kingdom during the battle, we must rescue them as well. They are important witnesses who will expose the Zippel for what they are. Don't worry. Hold on tight now. I'll descend at full speed right after I release my breath. Mirakan positioned himself in the air and took a deep breath. The shadow energy that broke the barrier now gathered in his mouth. The Dark Magic Guild's castle was about 300 meters away, which was quite far for most breath attacks. But it wasn't for Mirakan, not today. In fact, if there were no civilians to rescue inside the castle, Mirakan could even bring down the entire castle with a single breath. Whoosh! The dark breath streaked across the sky and headed towards the castle like a black meteor. Unconsciously, Jean swallowed his saliva as his gaze followed the tail of the breath. He shifted his attention to Mirakan's target of attack. He was already striking the outer walls. The breath completely disabled the layers of protection surrounding the walls and pierced through. The outer wall collapsed, causing a tremor. Immediately, a cloud of dust rose, covering the castle's foothills. Jean didn't have time to look in awe. They began to descend the moment Mirakan's breath hit the outer walls. The descent was so swift that Jin's cheeks were pushed back. Mirakan flew past the broken outer wall literally in the blink of an eye. He could hear screams. They were from the mages of the Dark Magic Guild and the Kinslow half-orcs who had been guarding the outer walls. Some were still falling in the air. Others barely held onto the broken parts of the wall, and the rest lay on the ground, completely knocked out by the sudden onslaught. From Mirakan's 2 wings, hundreds of lance-shaped forms of shadow energy emerged. The force pierced the necks and hearts of those lucky enough to survive and penetrated the bodies of those who were already dead, confirming their certain demise. Barely 10 seconds had passed since Mirakan initiated his attack. But over 200 mages and half-orcs were dead, and the castle was already half-ruined, unrecognizable from its appearance just 10 seconds ago. Not even Jean expected Mirakan to be so powerful with only 40% of his original power. The living must prepare to meet death, for no one will escape from me, Mirakan roared. Jean leaped off his back and hid amidst the chaos. Chapter 238. Individual Study, Group Study, 3. Emergency. Save me. A mage standing on the outer wall had his body cut in half as he attempted to create a shield barrier. Blades formed by shadow energy in the air sliced him in two. It wasn't just 1 or 2 blades in the air. There were hundreds of black blades floating in space, all moving at Mirakan's will. Each dance of the blades elicited a series of screams. Some died, while others had their bodies torn apart, leaving them incapacitated. Even the brave white wolf warriors couldn't avert their gaze from the horror and carnage unfolding before them. "I've said that no one will escape from me." Murakan spoke softly as he watched a group of mages fleeing from the outer wall. Upon hearing the dragon's words, black swords immediately impaled their backs. The mages didn't even have a chance to scream before they died. Murakan's black blades tore through the shield barriers of the 7-star mages as if they were made of paper. Murakan was the very god of death, wrapped in a whirlwind of blades. The dragon roared. The sound alone sent chills down one's spine and made one feel as if their flesh would melt off their skeleton. Humans fell to the ground and covered their ears from Murakan's roar. The Crimson Tiger warriors and White Wolf warriors raised their weapons in response. But it wasn't to fight against him. They only raised them out of instinct to cover their bodies and defend themselves. Unlike the Crimson Tigers, the White Wolf warriors looked towards Murakan, but they couldn't help but stagger on their paws like frightened little cubs. The King of the Sky, that's what dragons called Murakan. And Murakan's majesty certainly lived up to the name. If the goal were simply to rain punishments upon them, the battle would have already ended. Murakan had only stopped destroying them to save the captives. He had more than enough strength to bring down the entire castle. That crazy dragon! Jean looked at Murakan with a surprised expression on his face. Was this really the same dark and foolish dragon who couldn't stop reading his Eki books and asking for strawberry cakes? No wonder he always talked about his fullness. If this is 40% of his strength, with his full power, he could match my father or my sister. Jean had worried on the way to Otyrium. Although Murakan had regained his power, he wasn't quite sure if they could defeat all their enemies on their own. But now there was nothing to worry about. Even if the 4 9-star mages were here, he and Murakan wouldn't be in any danger. Now, the only question was the status of the Vankila captives. If Vitura was correct, there should be at least 600 captives who were brought here, or maybe more. There probably weren't many captives left unharmed. He had to secure at least a few sane ones. If every last one of them had been turned into biological golems, they could only bring them back dead. The captives wouldn't be able to testify to the kingdom. Jean started to move. He was dressed in a black robe and had activated the Myalta rune. He clearly looked like an intruder, but the busy mages running back and forth didn't pay him any attention. The entire castle was crumbling under the assault of the dark dragon. Everyone was fighting for survival. In fact, it was Jean who grabbed a passing mage. Jean tripped him and asked with a knife to his throat, "Where are the captives of the Holy Kingdom kept?" I don't know." Jean stabbed him without a moment's hesitation. He felt no pity or sympathy for the Kinsalo mages. He grabbed 3 more, asked them the same question, and disposed of them in the same way. But he didn't get any answers. The low-ranking mages don't know their location. TSK. Jean gritted his teeth and descended from the ruined outer wall to observe the people and half-orcs coming out from the entrance of the inner castle. He was able to distinguish 2 faces, Chukon Tolder and Suzanne Lalista. They were shouting at the top of their lungs, barking orders with veins bulging in their necks. All Class 1 and higher mages, prepare to cast binding spells. Deserters will be killed by my own hands. Anyway, it's impossible to escape from the Dark Dragon. Do your best to draw his attention while I cast the shield barrier. We must hold on until Sir Joe is ready. Suzanne and Chukon fought desperately. Undoubtedly, they understood better than the 200 mages who died on the outer walls the terror that Murakan was. Cold Joe. He must also be in the castle. No matter what Joe was preparing, it didn't seem like anything could threaten Murakan. Jean moved away from their sight. He stuck to the darkness of the shadow as he made his way through. When he reached the hallway, he encountered a group of Crimson Tiger warriors running out. 1, 2, 5. Jean counted their numbers and released the legendary energy he had concealed until now. The Crimson Tiger warriors were about to wield their weapons but recoiled at the force. Sigmund was already covered in lightning energy. PZZT. The tigers trembled violently from the impact of the lightning. They were already gripped by fear due to Murakan, who was outside the castle. With the added legendary energy, They couldn't do anything. Jean fried 4 of them to death and disabled one by cutting off his arm. He kept the last one captive. Then he asked the same question he had asked the mages. Underground prisoner camp. But Joe is currently collecting the experiments. What do you mean by that? He's gathering subjects who have energy similar to you the legendary energy. His ominous premonition proved correct. The Kinzalo were recreating the legends. A strong sense of repulsion surged within him. Jean glared and grabbed the Crimson Tiger by the neck. No, forgive me. Please, forgive me. I've told you everything. Lead the way to the prisoner camps. Yes, yes, sir. The Crimson Tiger foamed at the mouth and crawled on all 4s. Jean moved alongside him, constantly looking around as he did. He hoped to encounter enemies, but no one stood in his way. Most of the castle forces had fled as soon as Murakan's attacks began. He's here, sir. I was the one leading them. But there won't be many of them left. The hallway leading to the underground prisoner camp was filled with footprints. They were human footprints. The footprints showed that hundreds of people had left at once. It was Cold Joe's trail leading them out of their camp. The entrance to the prisoner camp was open. Jean slit the Crimson Tiger's throat. He jumped down to check the interior of the camp, planning to follow the footprints afterward. Despite its name, the inside of the prisoner camp resembled more of a sorcery laboratory. All sorts of jars filled with fluids and dirty books littered the floor, and iron cages were scattered everywhere. It was even larger than the central hall. Jean was about to think that Joe had taken all the souls from here when he heard a woman's voice. Are you sent by the Holy King? And is the dark dragon outside as well? The woman's eyes trembled with fear, but they showed the willpower of a person willing to face death itself. I ask, tell me what happened to the people of the Holy Kingdom. Did Cold Joe take every last one of them? Judging by her white lab coat, she seemed to have been conducting experiments on the people of the Holy Kingdom until a few moments ago. Jean was about to intimidate her with his sword when she raised both hands. I am a saint of the Dawn Cart Society. My name is Mertual Sela, a first-class saint under direct orders from the Holy King. I infiltrated the Dark Magic Guild 3 years ago under His Majesty's orders, and I have been acting as a researcher here. I haven't been able to contact the kingdom due to the high security protocols after becoming a researcher here. And you expect me to believe that? Then the lady opened her pendant to reveal a shield. The dormant volcano, the symbol of the Holy Kingdom. Jean glanced between the dormant volcano shield and the woman. I also have a lot to ask you, but we don't have time. A detonation spell has been activated in the laboratory wing. Look at the floor. A white magic circle was forming on the floor. It was a kind of security magic that had been placed by the Dark Magic Guild mages precisely for this kind of situation. In 5 minutes, the entire laboratory wing will disappear without a trace. We must save the survivors. Where are they? There's an underground passage known only to the researchers. Of the 823 people from the Holy Kingdom who were brought here as test subjects, 813 of them have been turned into biological battle golems and were taken by Joe. What? Once the laboratory wing is sealed, the mana insertion device won't last either. Then we won't be able to save the last 10 survivors. Crunch. Mertual opened a trapdoor in the ground, revealing a hidden space. 10 people were inside the space that led to the underground passage. Known only to the researchers, the survivors looked dazed and drooling. But they were citizens of the Holy Kingdom. We must save them. They must have something to bring to the Holy Kingdom, don't they? This will be the last chance we have. If we can't bring these survivors to the Holy Kingdom, according to Mertual, these 10 people were the only ones who could provide any testimony. Should he trust this woman? Perhaps she was playing a joke on him just to survive. He contemplated it for about 3 seconds. Then he heard a familiar sound coming from outside. It sounded very distant, but Jean immediately recognized what it was. It had to be the sound of activated lightning energy. It was clearly distinct from the sound of natural thunder and lightning. Joe's biological golems, the recreation of the legends. They were the source of the noise. Joe has activated the biological golems outside. No matter how strong the dark dragon outside is, it won't last long. You may not understand, but Joe has the people transformed into biological golems resembling the legends? How? Does the kingdom already have that information? Damn it. Fine. Mertual Sela, I'll trust you. We must rescue these 10 witnesses, no matter what. Is there any way? We just have to move the mana insertion device into the secret passage. Is it here? Jean pointed to a steel container connected to a transparent tube. Mertual nodded. Indeed, she was a spy working for the Holy King. The sudden assault had destroyed the laboratory wing, and the only people capable of providing testimony were about to die. She was defenseless and desperate. She had no way of moving such a heavy equipment to the passage by herself, when even most 5-star martial artists would struggle to move it. But Jean easily lifted the apparatus and inserted it into the passage. Why don't you also enter and wait for a while? Now, all we can do is pray to Ayula for the Dark Dragon's survival. I will start channeling all my mana into the people. Once I'm done, take the people and leave immediately. No, I will go out for a moment. You make sure these people survive. Don't you think you should quietly escape while Joe is still unaware of your presence? The Dark Dragon can fly, so I'm sure he can escape afterward. How do you expect me to escape with 10 people without a dragon? I can provide you with the demon beasts trained by the Dark Magic Guild. Mertual knew how shameless she was to ask Jean to escape at the expense of Muraken's safety. But she had no choice, as she thought it was the last chance to send witnesses to the Holy Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom is important, yes, but to me, he is a higher priority. I can't help the Holy Kingdom if I have to ignore the harm that may befall Muraken. I understand. I will try to return as soon as possible. May Ayula protect you and the Dark Dragon. Jean closed the entrance to the hidden passage and turned around. He understood better than anyone the power of the legends. If the new biological golems could generate power similar to that of the illustrious legends, even Muraken would be in danger. Something caught his attention as soon as he stepped outside. Thousands of lightning bolts were branching across the sky. Chapter 239. Individual Study, Group Study 4. The sky was blue, as if bruised by lightning. It produced a noise that numbed the ears, and its brightness hurt the eyes. Under the sky, there were monstrous creatures that could no longer be called human. They were the 813 victims of the biological golem experiments. Their transformation had been completed, and their bodies were enveloped in lightning energy, just like a legend using the powers of their light heart. The lightning extended across the sky whenever the light surrounding the biological golems grew brighter. Muraken was covered in lightning and was no longer visible. The lightning from the biological golems seemed like a formidable force. But aside from the visual impact of covering the sky, the actual strength was not as transcendent as Mertual thought. The way they employed the energy was quite similar, but it didn't come close to the thunder and lightning of true legends. At least Muraken would never suffer any harm from those biological golems. Jean had run away at the possibility that the golems possessed power similar to that of the legends. Mertual also mentioned that the Dark Dragon won't withstand them. She wasn't entirely wrong. If there were 800 lightning-powered biological golems, 3 9-star mages, hundreds of Dark Magic Guild mages, white werewolves and crimson tigers, most dragons, and even renowned martial artists, they would do well to retreat without hesitation. But Mertual didn't know the powers of Muraken, the Dark Dragon, nor those of the true legends or Jean. You captured innocents and turned them into monsters, mocking my brothers. How dare you, you damned bastards! Jean unsheathed Sigmund. The Dark Magic Guild would be wiped off the face of the earth once and for all this very day. Muraken! Jean put strength into his voice and spoke his dragon's name. A dark whirlwind formed in the midst of the blue-lit sky, revealing Muraken's form. All members of the Dark Magic Guild, except the biological golems, turned their gaze toward Jean. That bastard! What's that bastard doing here? It was the Grand Magus of Ans, Chukon told her, who shouted in panic. He recognized Jean as soon as he saw the magical helmet, the Myalta rune. The other 9-star mages were bewildered seeing Chukan trembling. Lord Chukan, do you know that man? The man was thin to the bone with sunken eyes. It was Cold Joe. He's the bastard who stole the compass in the Bellard feudal states. Be careful. The force of lightning he wields is incomparable to these biological golems. Joe and Suzanne were about to respond when Murakin spoke up. Did you get what you needed? He was asking about the location of the captives and the evidence to bring to the Holy Kingdom. Jean nodded. Then there should be no need to prolong this any further. What should I do here? Kill all the biological golems and the rest. Disable the 9-star mages and capture them alive. That's a tough order. Can I just kill them all? If so, capture only one of them, Cold Joe. A smile formed on Murakin's lips. No problem. Sounds quite simple. Those bastards are clearly insane. Do they consider themselves Siren Runcandle or Kiliak Zippel? Bam! Cold Joe shouted as he struck the ground with his staff. The fact that the sudden assault had brought down the castle and forced the closure of the laboratory was already vexing enough. With this teenager provoking him, Cold Joe felt like his blood could start boiling at any moment. Suzanne Lalista had a similar reaction. Although the sudden assault had caught them off guard, she didn't believe that the Dark Magic Guild's base would fall against just one dragon and a martial artist. Only Chukan told her, who had personal experience with Jean, maintained a tense expression on his face. Of course, he also thought it was impossible for the two of them to win against their entire force, regardless of Jin's skill. The dark dragon in the sky was certainly impressive, but there was no way he could wreak havoc across the entire area while Joe and he were fighting. He should have been sure of that. But why do I still have this ominous feeling? Chukan was about to take a deep breath to rid himself of the unsettling feeling gripping his heart. Whoosh! Shadow energy surged from Murakin's wings like a tsunami. In an instant, the shadow energy stretching across the sky turned into a tornado and swallowed the lightning, spreading darkness over the land. The biological golems continuously spewed lightning energy. The lightning tried to rise toward the sky but completely dissipated at the boundary of the area invaded by the force of shadows. Well, you wouldn't be the shadow dragon if you were any weaker. Let's see how long that confidence of yours lasts. Mediocre men, get him! Joe shouted, causing the semi-orcs in the area to raise their weapons in unison. They began to advance toward Jean with murder in their eyes. BZZT, PZT. The force of lightning coiling around Sigmund's pale blade started violently branching at Jin's will. The smarter semi-orcs trembled and began to retreat. And the slower ones thought that Jin's lightning was no different from that of the biological golems and raised their auras. The lightning shot out from Sigmund and spread across the area like pillars. Murakin sneered at Joe's ignorance and unleashed all the shadow energy shrouding the sky. The alpha and omega for anyone wielding shadow energy. Murakin's amber eyes flashed. The entire area immediately plunged into absolute darkness. It wasn't a matter of expression. Everyone on the ground, except Jean, felt that the world around them instantly darkened. It was only a brief moment. Yet, anyone would be terrified to see their vision darken against their will. When they regained their sight, the Dark Magic Guild mages and semi-orcs reacted by touching their faces around the eyes and checking each other's faces with a look that asked, "Did you just lose your sight too?" They all thought that nothing had actually happened. That is, until the shadows under their own feet began to move on their own. Huh? Ugh! What the hell is this? My shadow, it's... Their shadows were being torn apart. The usual shadows that moved according to the light source were nowhere to be found. They were tearing and elongating randomly. Some even merged with the shadows of others. None of them had experienced or imagined such things in their lives. The grotesque scene unfolding before them made them feel nauseous and shivers ran down their spines. Not all shadows behaved that way. Out of the remaining 600 mages and half-men, around half experienced that phenomenon. But even those whose shadows didn't change were equally shocked. First of all, I see the need to reduce the number. Watching those things writhing and squirming is not a pleasant sight. Don't you think? Murakin said, Screams and muffled sounds of things breaking and bursting spread across the ground. It started with those on the outskirts of the shadow energy release. Around 300 of them experienced bodies twisted, torn, and shattered like hammered sculptures. They were deformed according to their own shadows. Those whose shadows had their necks cut lost their heads. Those with burst shadows exploded. The corpses fell to the ground without resistance. But the shadows leaving their bodies entered the sky and were absorbed by Murakan. Joe and Suzanne changed their minds. At that moment, they instinctively knew that something was terribly wrong. They had mastered magic for decades to become great mages, but they had never heard of anything like this. Chukan had his shield barriers raised for some time. Joe and Suzanne immediately began casting their spells. But they had already lost precious seconds contemplating the hell unleashed by the release of shadow energy, something they would regret for the rest of their lives. Because in that brief moment, Jean had finished preparing his move. Sigmund pierced the ground, once again painting the shadow-filled earth blue. It was the battle god's fourth combat technique, erosion. The lightning pillars floating in the area followed Sigmund's descent and impaled the ground simultaneously. Dense lightning flowed throughout the area, just as the hundreds of biological golems had covered the sky in blue, at least until Murakan began unleashing his power. But it wasn't the same lightning. Even the 9-star mages who had never seen the power of legends instinctively understood that this was the real deal. The erosion lightning even forced Vanessa Olsen's 10-star knight instincts to step back. There was no way ordinary half-men warriors could withstand the real lightning. The light pillars embedded in the ground began to unleash thunder. Jin's lightning streaked across the dark sky. "Get away from him!" Joe shouted at the semi-orcs charging at Jean and extended his staff. But it was too late. The fierce lightning storm killed more than half of the semi-orcs surrounding Jean. The rest managed to stay alive thanks to the shield barriers cast by Joe and Chukan. But the surviving rank-and-file soldiers seemed dazed. They could only stare at the ground. They were paralyzed by Jin's fierce legendary energy, which was stronger than ever. Jean had 2 swords. With Sigmund maintaining the erosion, it was Bradamanti's turn to leave her sheath. The black-coated blade rushed toward the throats of the semi-orcs huddled under the shield barrier. Each sword strike dropped heads to the ground. Joe's eyes met Jin's, who was killing the half-men as if he were the harbinger of death. There were still around 500 biological golems left. "Bring him down," Joe shouted, sending all the biological golems charging at Jean. But incomplete biological golems, capable of gathering the powers of only 4 or 5 stars, wouldn't harm Jean at all. That wasn't why Joe shouted for them to attack. He was only trying to buy time until Jean could reach him. Joe also realized that the number of biological golems wouldn't prove anything against Jean and Murakan. Their prowess, especially Murakan's, was clearly beyond his comprehension. "I shouldn't have wasted time gathering these golems. I should have fled. I was a fool." Regretting was useless. Jean summoned Tess. Then he pushed back the biological golems, no, the poor golemized civilians, and lunged toward Joe. "It's time to pay the price for mocking my brothers." Suzanne and Chukan were too busy blocking Murakan's attacks. Joe watched as the defenseless biological golems fell to the blue flames. Then he reminded himself of how Jean had mentioned capturing him alive. "I must surrender and survive. As long as I'm alive, the leader will save me, no matter what happens." Chapter 240. Individual Study, Group Study, 5. The flames of pressure spread, wild and fierce. What an unsettling feeling. The fact that the biological golems being engulfed by the flames were civilians not long ago, and the fact that their legendary brethren were being ridiculed, left a bitter taste. "I know you're trying to buy time with the golems as shields. Don't you have any shame as a great mage? Get your ass out of here, Joe. I'm quickly losing interest in capturing you alive." Stop. I'll surrender. So stop your attacks." Joe raised his arms and his staff in a gesture of surrender. Chukan and Suzanne's eyes widened. There they were, desperately defending against Murakan's attacks, but their leader, Joe, had suddenly surrendered. To make matters worse, it was he who had taunted Murakan by saying, You wouldn't be the shadow dragon if things had gone worse. And now, he displayed a completely different attitude. They could barely believe what they were hearing. Sir Joe, what are you saying now? Are you really going to surrender? Suzanne asked, but Joe scolded her instead. Darn it! Slow. Don't you realize the power of the dark dragon? They're enemies we can't defeat. At this rate, we'll be annihilated. It's only a matter of time. Surrender is the only way. But what? Great mages. Express your surrender as well before I change my mind. Consider the situation and set aside all positions, pride and shame. Joe was right. Chukan and Suzanne knew full well that they had no chance against those monsters. The three hadn't felt this way in a long, long time, since they reached the heights of a 9-star mage. Stop with the nonsense, Sir Joe. Have you been hit on the head? Surrender? Are those the words of a true leader? If we surrender, do you think that demon will keep us alive? Idiot! Chukan sharply turned his head and shouted. Lord Chukan, what did you just say? It's that dark dragon we can't handle, not that brat. If we capture him and hold him hostage, we can make the dark dragon step aside. No dragon guardian will let their contractor die. Chukan was the only one among them who had known Jean before, and that's why he felt a mysterious foreboding that something bad was going to happen. The incredible abilities that surpassed his age were one thing, but Chukan had the ominous feeling that things would turn against Jean due to mind games like last time, when he met Jean on the abandoned island off the waters of the Bellard feudal states. He only thought of him as a magic swordsman. He had never imagined that this young man had anything to do with Soderette or the Dark Dragons. Magic abilities of over 7 stars, swordsmanship of over 8 stars, terrifying lightning, and now even shadow energy. Even the 9-star mages would prefer not to fight against him. If Sir Joe surrenders now, there is no future. We must capture that bastard and negotiate with the Dark Dragon. That's what Chukan had been thinking since he realized Jean was a contractor. If they could seize that boy, this battle was in the bag. Sir Joe, don't surrender and capture that brat. Sir Chukan is right, Sir Joe. Despite his immense talent, he is still a young monster. If we combine our powers... No, don't you think you could capture him yourself, Sir Joe? Suzanne chimed in. Joe couldn't say anything for some time due to his embarrassment. Everything they were saying was true. What humiliation is this? How did I not come up with such a simple solution? I only thought of relying on our leader. It wasn't because Joe was slow. As Chukan mentioned, he truly was dangerous. I just felt intimidated by his audacity and got scared for no reason. It was just an instinctive fear towards the stronger. I was irrational. Yes, no matter how strong the Dark Dragon is, he won't be able to do anything once we have his contractor. We'll keep the Dark Dragon tied down for as long as we can. We won't be able to push him for much longer. So hurry up and grab him. Meanwhile, the shouts of the biological golems, the semi-orcs, and the mages filled the battlefield. And due to the noise, Jean and Murakan couldn't hear the conversation between the 9-star mages. But Jean could see that they had shared a conversation that caused a shift in Joe's attitude, who moved away from surrendering. Joe's staff began to fill with mana. Despite the infamy of his particularly cunning, inhumane, frivolous, and difficult character that constantly overshadowed his abilities, Joe was still a great mage who had long been considered the nemesis of Andre Zippel. Get lost! Worthless trash! The remaining biological golems followed Joe's orders and began to disperse to the side. With the path cleared, Tess unleashed her breath towards Joe. Joe cast spells in line with the descriptor preceding his name. Cold Joe. The ground beneath Tess's breath cracked, and ice pillars shot out. Unlike most ice-based magic, this ice shimmered with a somber purple hue. What appeared as pillars were actually a mouth made of ice. It was the mouth of another golem created by Joe. The open jaws snapped at Tess's breath, tearing it apart like a beast cutting a snake. Then it growled in a low, sinister tone. Whoa! Jean couldn't hide his surprise at the abrupt appearance of a golem from beneath the ground. It had even bitten Tess's flames upon emerging. Jean himself had to shudder at such a scene. What is that thing? Don't tell me that ridiculous thing was hiding underground. It wasn't just Jean. Even Murakin seemed surprised. Pole, look. Extinguish Tessa's flames and protect me, Joe shouted. Unlike the incomplete biological golems they had recently started manufacturing with the wisdom and memories of their leader, this golem called Poluk was already complete. It was an ice golem immune to fire. To create Poluk, Joe had to search through ancient glaciers to find a white elephant, capture young demons, and use 5 phoenix hearts and wings. He started crafting the golem in the time when he dreamed of surpassing Andre and even challenging Kiliak. It took him almost 20 years to complete it. It was Cold Joe, the great mage's greatest work and masterpiece. This was why Chukan and Suzanne considered Joe to be on a higher level than theirs, despite all being 9-star mages. The blue flames spreading across the battlefield began to extinguish with Paluk's appearance. Meanwhile, Joe began casting his own spells, which he had created and named Glacier Cold. The purple ice fragments that sprouted from his staff instantly surrounded Jean. It was as if hundreds of archers were aiming at Jean. So that's why you were Andre Zippel's rival. Jean positioned himself and prepared to dodge the ice. He also glanced at Chukan and Suzanne without letting Joe notice. If Tessa's flames didn't work, it was too risky to fight such a monster. To make matters worse, Joe had saved most of his mana by using the biological golems as shields. In comparison, Jean was much more fatigued from using the battle god's movement and summoning Tess. Extreme defense. It lives up to its name. Its defensive capabilities are certainly impressive. 2 9-star warlocks. Since one of the two was famous for being a master of defensive spells, even Murakin with 40% of his power restored had difficulty penetrating their barriers. It was also because Murakin couldn't afford to bombard the area where Jean was. I should save myself until Murakin gets rid of those two. I don't even know how Joe's signature spells work. Jean had just chosen to fight more efficiently. TSK, you must be seriously crazy. Although I suspect it was your ignorance that led you to make such a mistake, useless one. Murakin shook his head with wide-open eyes. Everyone on the battlefield could hear his solemn dragon voice. How dare you bring forth a golem made by desecrating a phoenix's corpse before the very master of the Fire Kingdom, after recreating the legends as well. You have a talent for causing disasters, Murakin said. Shwoom. Murakin stopped his attacks and descended to Jean. He then returned to his human form and forcefully cast a shadow shield barrier to cover the two of them. That knight is out of control. I don't think I should stop him. Right now, that knight is going to break the contract he made with you and forcefully use all your powers. Despite how much he appreciates you, this is completely unacceptable to him, Murakin whispered. Eh? Bang. Jean staggered and fell onto one knee. His energy was being drained before Murakin could finish explaining. He appreciates you a lot, so he probably wouldn't use your life force. But, oh, he wouldn't use your life force, right? No, he won't. Damn it. I'll explain it to you later. Jean closed his eyes. A great drowsiness took hold of his body, and he felt helpless against it. Murakin brought his palm to his forehead, frustrated. In the next instant, Tess screeched, turning the battlefield into a blue inferno. The blue flames spread as quickly as Tessa's cry resonated. It took barely 30 seconds for the hundreds of remaining biological golems to turn into ashes, and the lower-level mages met the same fate. All members of the Dark Magic Guild, except the 3 9-star mages, were dead. What's happening? Joe managed to avoid the flames. He turned his head as he ran towards Chukin's shield barrier and saw his masterpiece, Poluk, being devoured by the flames. It wasn't ignited or covered in flames. It was literally being devoured by the flames, similar to how Poluk had chewed on Tessa's breath. Even Joe, Chukan, and Suzanne had to retreat in fear. They knew Tess was one of the largest phoenixes, but this was something they couldn't comprehend with their knowledge. On the other hand, Murakin sighed in relief at the scene. He managed to control his temper somehow. He feared that he might annihilate the entire area by drawing on the boy's life force. He's more rational than I thought. Poluk vanished without a trace. Not a single trace remained. Turned into blue ash. Obviously, Tess went after the 9-star warlocks next, as if her fury hadn't been satisfied yet. Murakan was worried that she might cause trouble by not controlling her anger. Perhaps it would be wise to retreat now? Look here. The brat has fainted. This is gonna bring trouble, you know? I'll make sure that idiot suffers a lot, so take a breath. Huh? Wait a moment. What is that supposed to be? Murakan pointed towards the collapsed outer wall with his finger. There was a faint human figure on the debris of the outer wall. Can you check what that is before you leave? Do you know what it is? I have a bad feeling. You don't know what it is either? Are you leaving now? You want me to take care of the child? Yes, sure. Well thought out. Leave this to me then.